Welcome to Russian History Retold, episode 357, Ivan Grozny Revisited. Last time, I uploaded my interview with Ambassador James P. Cain, author of the book Reign of Secrets, and by the way, I'm reading it now, and it's excellent. Today, we go back to our series on revisiting historical figures from Russian history by focusing on Ivan IV. My primary sources include three biographies of Ivan having, the same name, Ivan the Terrible. The first is by Andrei Pavlov and Maureen Perry, the second by Robert Payne and Nikita Romanov, and the third by Isabel de Madriaga. As for the name Grozny, it only began to be used in reference to Ivan in the 18th century, with the first Russian historian using it was Vasily Tatashev. However, the epithet gained popularity with the writings of the historian Nikolai Karamzin. Ivan has been vilified, praised, but never dismissed as an important figure in Russian history. Both Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Putin have praised Ivan, although in Putin's case, it is primarily about the Tsar's role in building a strong Russian state, whereas Stalin reportedly remarked that Ivan, quote unquote, killed too few boyars, and that he should have probably gone further to unify and strengthen the Russian state. Still, not all Russian rulers admired him. A notable counterexample is Tsar Alexander II, who reportedly considered Ivan unworthy of inclusion in the 1862 Millennium of Russia monument. Generally, traditional historians seem to sit on two sides of the fence on Ivan. The one side stresses his nation-building and the centralization of power into the hands of the autocrat. The other side stresses his tyrannical behavior, mass repression, paranoia, and the use of the oprichnina, which we will get into shortly. As for the consensus of historians, Ivan was neither simply a nation-building hero nor merely a mad tyrant. Most historians regard him as a ruler who helped create a more centralized Russian state, but whose use of terror and repression left a dark and lasting mark on Russian history. Before we get into the meat of his reign, let's talk a bit about his birth and his youth, which was pretty awful by any stretch of the imagination. His father, Vasily III, was unable to have his first wife, Salomonia, bear him any children, putting the Rurik line of Russian rulers in jeopardy. Vasily decided that he needed to divorce his wife and found another one post-haste, but the Russian Orthodox Church was having none of that. Salomonia had numerous powerful friends that she used to help stop the divorce, but Vasily was onto it, and one by one he banished them far away from Moscow. Finally, the Grand Prince got his divorce and sent Salomonia to a nunnery in Suzdal. This would draw the ire of the church, with the Patriarch of Jerusalem putting a curse on any child that might come from any new marriage. Quote, "If you should do this evil thing, you shall have an evil son. Your nation shall become prey to terrors and tears. Rivers of blood will flow. The heads of the mighty will fall. Your cities will be devoured by flames." Vasily, unburdened by the curse and any other resentment towards the divorce, would marry Princess Elena Glinskaya, a Lithuanian, on January 21st, 1526. It would be more than 4 years before Elena would bear Vasily his heir on August 25th, 1530. As Payne and Romanov put it, quote, "The chroniclers report that in various parts of Russia, the birth was accompanied by sudden, terrifying storms which shook the foundations of the earth. Auguries, real or imaginary, attend the birth of great princes, and these sudden storms on a day of clear summer skies seemed an appropriate augury for a child who was to be known as Ivan Grozny. For Grozny means dreadful or terrible, and derives ultimately from grom, meaning thunder. His mother would bear another child, Yuri, but he would be both deaf and dumb. This would lead to panic attacks by both of Ivan's parents anytime he got sick. It would not be Ivan who would need to be taken care of, for it would be his father, Vasily. He would develop a sore on the inside of his left thigh, which would eventually become infected. Knowing he was dying, Vasily would draw up a will in which he gave Russia to his 3-year-old son Ivan, who would rule under his mother as regent and follow the advice from the Council of Boyars until Ivan reached the age of 15, where he would ascend to the throne on his own. Vasily would pass on December 3rd, 1533. This would be the beginning of some of the worst times in Ivan's young life. With Vasily's death, Russia had been in very capable hands for 70 years, first with Ivan the Great, Ivan the Third, and then with his son. As Payne and Romanov would write, quote, "Now Russia was rudderless and adrift." The early life of Ivan and his brother Yuri was spent within the walls of the Kremlin, rarely leaving it to go out except on pre-planned pilgrimages to the shrines of the saints. The only time that either of the boys was treated with any deference was when they trotted them out to meet with foreign ambassadors or on ceremonial occasions. Ivan's mother, Elena, together with Prince Ivan Telepnev-Oblinsky, began to purge those princes that they deemed to be a threat to the young Tsar. Many would be starved to death, while some of the luckier ones were just banished from Moscow. When Elena died in 1538, when Ivan was a mere 8 years old, there would be retribution. First, Ivan's governess, someone he loved dearly, was sent to a convent far away, with Oblinsky being put into a cell, where he starved to death, just like Michael Galinsky did years before. With no protectors left, Ivan would become miserable. The leading boyars from the Shuisky family would dominate the council and enrich themselves through bribery and outright theft. According to de Madriaga, in her biography of Ivan, quote, "According to his later recollections, Ivan and Yuri were ill-fed and hungry, and nothing was done as Ivan wished." In a letter to Andrei Kurbsky, Ivan remembered, quote, "My brother Yuri, of blessed memory, and me, they bought up like vagrants and children of the poorest, what I have suffered for want of garments and food." What really went on during the many years after the death of Elena is up for grabs. As Pavel and Perry write in their biography of Ivan, quote, "Court politics during the minority of Ivan IV, as we have seen, were complex and sometimes bloody. Much is unclear, the sources are defective and often contradictory, and historians have resorted to various types of speculation about the nature of the vested interests at stake. So basically, much of what we know and what we think we know about Ivan and the goings-on at the court is unknown and purely speculative. This is not surprising, as there was no completely neutral first-hand account of Ivan at any point in his life. Nearly every source falls into one of three categories: Ivan and his supporters defending his rule, enemies such as Andrei Kurbsky attacking him, or foreign observers who often found Muscovy exotic and sometimes exaggerated what they thought and saw. Ivan was crowned at the Cathedral of Dormition on January 16, 1547, at the age of 16 in the Moscow Kremlin. The Metropolitan placed the signs of royal dignity on Ivan, the cross of the living giving tree, and the cap of Monomakh. While his grandfather Ivan would use the term Tsar in his correspondence with foreign leaders, Ivan IV would be the first to be crowned Tsar. 2 weeks after the coronation, Ivan would marry Anastasia Romanovna, who became the first Russian Tsarista. She was the mother of Fyodor I, the last lineal Rurikid Tsar of Russia, and the great-aunt of Michael of Russia, the first Tsar of the Romanov dynasty. The two would be married for 13 years, and she would bear the Tsar 6 children. In the first year of their marriage, 1547, Moscow was swept up in a massive fire. The fire, which occurred on June 24th, displaced about 80,000 people and killed about, the estimates are between 2,700 to about 3,700 people, not including children, which is a common omission during that era. They didn't do a census of the children because they would tend to die, quite often very young. So they really wouldn't include them in these kind of numbers. The Muscovite people put the blame on the Tsar's maternal relatives from the Galinsky family. Many members of the family were killed, and they would lose their position in the court of the Tsar. In the 1550s, Ivan would begin to reform a number of institutions within Russia, starting with the Sudebnik of 1550, which was an expansion and revision of the Sudebnik of 1497, a code of laws originally instituted by Ivan III, his grandfather. It would take away the aristocratic privilege before the judiciary, a pattern that Ivan would continue with against the boyars, who he felt disrespected him during his youth. Ivan was dispersing the power away from the traditional areas and consolidating them in his hand.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Do you know that feeling you get when you score front row seats to a Broadway show? Well, this is kind of like that, except you don't have to leave your couch. This week on Laugh, Love, Law, I'm hanging out with Broadway superstar Lenady Hanau. And trust me, we go way beyond the standing ovations. We laugh, we get real, we swap stories, and yes, there might even be a little singing. So grab your headphones and join us for an episode full of laughter, heart, music, and a little Broadway magic.
He would establish a standing army known as the Streltsy. Ivan would then convene the Zemsky Sobor, regarded as the first Russian parliament of feudal estates, and also establish the Chosen Council, a body of advisors drawn from the nobility and clergy. Things would change in 1553 when Ivan became deathly ill. Because his son Dmitry was only 6 months old at the time, Ivan's potential death plunged Russia into a dynastic crisis. Furthermore, the crisis would deepen with the death of his son in mid-1553. There was also a plot to overthrow Ivan that was discovered in 1554, led by Prince Semyon Rostovsky, who attempted to escape to Lithuania, but was caught at the border. During his imprisonment and torture, Rostovsky would implicate a number of boyars who would be either executed or sent into exile. In 1560, another fire broke out in Moscow in July, which would devastate the city, but also cause the health of the Tsarista to begin to fail. To top it off, a Crimean Tatar army would attack the capital city on August 2nd, which would further exacerbate her ill health. On August 7th, Anastasia would pass away. Anastasia's death in 1560, at the age of either 29 or 30, we're not sure the year she was born, would shake Ivan to his very core. Her death would unleash a world of hurt on the very boyars who he blamed for his miserable childhood, as he accused them of somehow poisoning her, which, in honesty, there was very little evidence for. While traces of both arsenic and mercury found in her exhumed body, there was no one who would have benefited from her death. As author Isabel de Madriaga put it, quote, "The general conclusion one can draw from the evidence is that Anastasia was not poisoned, and that Ivan's later determination to believe that she was formed part of the paranoia, which was gradually gathering within him and obscuring his vision." The change in Ivan was described by historian Nikolai Karamazin this way, quote, "This was the end of the happy days for Ivan and for Russia, for he lost not only his wife, but his better nature." The pressure was now on Ivan to remarry, although Metropolitan McCurry may have pushed it a bit quickly, telling the Tsar only a week after Anastasia's death to get going and selecting a new bride. Now, there was talk of marrying one of the daughters of the King of Lithuania, Poland. The deal never came into being. Instead, Ivan would marry a Tatar princess in 1561, a 15-year-old named Kucheny, who would convert to Orthodoxy and take the name Maria. While Anastasia was able to tame Ivan's temper, Maria would do the exact opposite, encouraging his wild behavior. This would begin, as Ivan's old friend and now enemy Andrei Kurbsky would say, the Great Persecution. Boyar family after boyar family would be targeted by Ivan for any offense he saw or believed in. All the while, Russia suffered from a combination of drought, famine, military defeats in the wars against the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, recurring Tatar invasions, and a naval blockade of the Baltic trade imposed by the Swedes, Poles, and the Hanseatic League. By 1564, Ivan sent a letter to the Zemsky Sobor announcing his resignation as Tsar. The panicked assembly begged Ivan to return. He told them he would only do so if they granted him absolute power. This is when he created the Oprichnina, a policy which included mass repression of the boyars, public executions, and confiscation of their land and property. Whatever restraint that would have held Ivan back disappeared with the death of his second wife, Maria, on September 1st, 1569. What the Oprichniki, these are the men who Ivan entrusted with the Oprichnina, would do to the people of Tver and then Novgorod would not be matched in Russian history until the time of Joseph Stalin. Ivan believed that the inhabitants of both of these cities were somehow colluding with his mortal enemies, the Lithuanians. Part of this belief was due to his former friend, Prince Andrei Kurbsky, defecting to the Lithuanian side, who would conduct raids into Russian territories. In late December 1569, Ivan would put a cordon around all the cities and houses between Alexandrovskaya Sloboda, his part-time capital, and Novgorod. As the Oprichniki marched towards Novgorod, they would slaughter many of the people in the way. Many would die in Pskov for no other reason than they were there. The ex-metropolitan Philip, who was imprisoned in the monastery, was suffocated on December 23rd for refusing to give Ivan his blessings to attack Archbishop Pimen of Novgorod. For the next 5 days, the Oprichniki would ravage the city of Tver, with estimates of deaths ranging from 10 to 36,000. Then, on January 2nd, 1570, Ivan began his attack on Novgorod, first surrounding it, then launching his attacks on the church. One of the main reasons some have speculated for the plundering of the Russian Orthodox churches of Novgorod was because the governmental treasury in Moscow was nearly empty. Ivan would, on January 8th, attend the church service at the Cathedral of St. Sophia. Afterwards, he would begin his sack of the church after humiliating Archbishop Pimen by tying him to a mare and sending him to Moscow. The following day, the trials and slaughter of the inhabitants of the city, men, women, and children, would begin. Known as the Massacre of Novgorod, the killings quickly became the most vicious and the brutal legacy of the Oprichnina, with estimates of casualties between 2,000 to 15,000. Many were thrown into holes in the ice of the Volkhov River, drowning whole families who had been tied together. The destruction that had been wrought on the ancient city of Novgorod would never allow it to return to its former glory. Historian and biographer of Ivan, R.G. Sikrenikov, wrote, quote, "The sack of Novgorod is the most repulsive episode in the brutal history of the Oprichnina. The cruel, senseless slaughter of innocent people made Oprichnina synonymous with lawlessness and excess." The destruction of Novgorod had severe repercussions for Moscow, as in 1571, 40,000 troops from the Crimean Khanate invaded the Russian capital and totally devastated it. The following year, they returned, but this time led by Prince Mikhail Voronsky and the Strelsky. The Russians soundly defeated the Crimean Tatars, causing them to flee in disarray. As Ivan was wont to do, anyone he viewed as a potential threat, he would kill Prince Mikhail Voronsky the following year. Due to the lack of effective response to the 1571 raid by the Oprichniki, Ivan decided to end their reign of terror in 1572, totally ending the Oprichnina. The Zemshashina and the Oprichnina territories, the latter being Ivan's personal realm, were reunited and placed under the rule of a reformed boyar council, which included members from both sides of the divided apparatus. The legacy of the Oprichnina was the consolidation of power to the ruler of Russia, a legacy that remains to this day under Vladimir Putin. Turning to Ivan's personal life, he would marry another 4 times, officially after the death of wife number 2, Maria. There are rumors that he married 2 other times, but that's more hearsay than fact. His marriage to Anna Koltsovskaya, which lasted only 1 month, would be the last one that was sanctioned by the Russian Orthodox Church. Ivan's last official wife, Maria Fyodorovna Nagaya, whom he married on September 6, 1580, was the mother of Tsarevich Dmitry Ivanovich, who would be the heir apparent to the last remaining son of Ivan, Fyodor I. Dmitry's disputed death at the age of 8 on May 15, 1591, would precipitate the famous multiple false Dmitrys of the time of troubles. Ivan Grozny's demeanor would continue to deteriorate in the last years as Tsar. It would culminate with the beating death of his son and heir apparent, Ivan Ivanovich. The most important issue that the Tsar had to deal with in his final years was the Livonian War. Beginning in 1558, the war would drag on for 24 years against the Kingdom of Sweden, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Kingdom of Poland, and the Teutonic Knights of Livonia. It would cause undue hardships on the Russian people, which added to the problems caused by numerous famines and outbreaks of the plague. By the time of Ivan's death on March 28, 1584, the Russian treasury was, for all accounts, empty. According to Russian historian Janet Martin, quote, "The reign of Ivan the Terrible was, in short, a disaster for Muscovy. His subjects were impoverished, his economic resources depleted, his army weakened, and his realm militarily defeated. By the time Ivan IV the Terrible died in 1584, Moscow was on the brink of ruin." Ivan's feeble son Fyodor would ascend to the throne after his father's death, but the country was effectively administered in his name by Boris Godunov, the brother of Fyodor's wife Irina. He would reign for 14 years until his death in 1598. It would mark the end of the line of the Rurikid princes that took what was the dynasty that started in Kiev and lasted for over 700 years. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Join me next time when we finish the series by revisiting the life and times of Catherine II, also known as Catherine the Great. So, until next time, до свидания и спасибо за внимание.